And joining him, also an ally for our community, and we're so happy to have him in office, Mayor Bob Stevens, also here to talk to us today. Please welcome him to the stage.
Hey, thank you all so much. It is fantastic to be here today. I'd like to thank all of the organizers who put this event on, those who invited me to speak. I am so glad to be a part of this event. Now, if you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be speaking at Pride, I would have not believed you whatsoever. It has been a long journey for me getting here today as somebody who grew up in the churches of the Bible Belt. But I cannot be more pleased to be here today with all of you. I remember when I was younger being taught that being gay was sinful. That those who are gay or those who adopt the homosexual lifestyle are condemned by God. At first and for quite some time, I simply accepted the church's teachings as they were, without really thinking all that much about it. But over time, as I met more and more people who were gay, I started to sense a disconnect. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't making sense. And this feeling grew and grew over time. Now, I don't know about some of you who also grew up in the churches of the Bible Belt, but I vividly remember prayer meetings where people would literally lay hands on those struggling with what was called the demon of homosexuality. And they'd try to pray the gay away. I remember a couple of friends who tried so hard to be straight. They did everything their church told them they were supposed to do. They would go to therapy. They would pray. They would try so hard. Yet time and time again, all this only made them feel worse about themselves. That despite all of their best efforts, they felt like they would never measure up in the eyes of God. It was like the system was set up against them. And I remember feeling very frustrated at God. God seemed incredibly unfair. I began questioning what kind of value such a God had. At one point along the way, I thought about homosexuality as a sin along the same lines of alcoholism or adultery. And we still hear that, don't we? All too often in Christian circles. But after a while, even that no longer added up in my mind. I mean, think about it. If someone is an alcoholic and they get sober, their life gets better. Their life improves. And if in a relationship, neither partner cheats on the other, well, obviously that is much healthier for the relationship. The relationship is better. But I started to notice that people who are gay do not tend to get better over time when they try to renounce their sexuality. In fact, the gay people I knew who were most healthy were actually the ones who come to terms with their sexuality and did not try to repress or ask God to change it, but had accepted it as part of who God created them to be. And I started to think that people don't choose to be gay any more than I ever chose to be straight. Now, at this point along the way, I really wasn't sure what to do. All I knew was that I was in the process of changing my mind. And I didn't know what would come next. There's this great scene out of Mark Twain's novel Adventures of Huckleberry Finn that actually ended up being quite formative for me in its own way. This scene features Huck going back and forth, wondering what to do about his friend Jim, a slave who Huck had helped escape. Now, Huck knew he was supposed to return Jim to his owner. He knew he could get in big trouble for helping a slave get away. After all, Huck knew what he had been taught. Huck had been taught that everyone has their place. And for slaves, that place was with their master. In helping free Jim, Huck also knew he was going against what he had been taught. What he had been taught by social convention, and yes, what he had been taught by the church. In Huck's words, quote, "The plain hand of providence was slapping me in the face, letting me know my wickedness was being watched from up there in heaven." Huck recalled the way that in Sunday school class, he learned that people who help free the slaves, the way that he is helping free Jim, they go to everlasting fire. So out of fear, in order to do what Huck says was the right thing and the clean thing, according to my church, Huck decided to write a letter to Jim's owner telling her where she could pick Jim up. Huck said that after writing the letter, he felt all good and all washed clean of sin for the first time. And I knowed I could pray now. I was thinking how good it was that this happened so, and how near I came to being lost and going to hell. But then I went on thinking, and I got to thinking about our trip down the river, Jim and me. And I see my friend Jim before me all the time. And somehow I couldn't seem to strike no places to harden me against him, even though I know what I was taught. Huck thought about his friendship with Jim, and he thought about the letter that he was supposed to send to Jim's owner, telling her where she could pick up Jim. And he went back and forth, wondering what to do. Then finally, Huck took the letter. He held it in his hand. And he says, "I was a-trembling, because I got to decide forever betwixt two things, and I knowed it. I studied a minute, sort of holding my breath, and then says to myself, well, all right then, I will go to hell." And I tore up that letter because I could not betray my friend. For Huck, there was a deeper ethic, a deeper truth at work than what he was initially taught by social convention and by the church. It was a truth that valued the dignity of all people, including slaves. And Huck began to realize that what he had been taught by his church, what he had been taught by social convention, was flat out wrong. And of course, I started thinking about all of this in relationship to my friends who are gay. When I began to consider the possibility that the church got it wrong when it came to slavery and women's rights, or that the Bible often reflects the prejudices of the day and the culture in which it was written, when I began to recognize these kinds of things, it was like I was able to see with new eyes. I started to believe that the church got it wrong historically when it comes to my LGBT friends. Nowadays, I'm at the point where I do not advocate for the rights of all people in spite of my faith, but rather precisely because of my faith. I recognize that from a historical perspective, the teachings of the church have often been problematic, have often fallen short of the measure of love. And anytime the teachings of the church or of social convention, anytime they fall short of the measure of love, then the church, then society, then all of us are called to reconform and reconfigure so that our world, our society better reflects the measure of love. For if love is the only measure, St. Augustine once said, then the only measure of love is love without measure. Nowadays, it is my faith in Christ, the one who embodied such beautiful love, that leads me to stand up for the rights of all, the dignity of all. It is my faith in Christ that leads me to be more inclusive of others rather than less. If Jesus is Lord, as Christians often say He is, He shows us that life is measured by love. That is the principle that I will hold dear. That is the principle that we stand and celebrate here today, whether we're religious or not. And of course, we remember that that ethic of love transcends religions. It is found in a wide number of religions, and it is not only found within religion. Now, in closing, I just want to reflect very briefly. A lot of people, especially after the YouTube video, have said that I've got a lot of courage as a pastor to come out in support of the gay community. That I risk my job and things along those lines. And I appreciate such sentiments. I very much appreciate such sentiments. But I always also want to respond by saying a couple of things. First, is that there are a whole lot of pastors like myself, many of them here today, who they may not be the most vocal voices in our community or in our society, but there are many of us here who are open, who are affirming. And so I'm hardly alone. Also, I always want to say a big thanks to the community of Brentwood Christian Church and the people there who I have the privilege of working with. It is because of their support. It is because of their support and their encouragement that I am able to vocalize my support in a public way. But more importantly, and this is what I try to emphasize the most, and that's that any kind of adversity that I face as a straight white male ally is nothing compared to the daily adversity felt by my gay friends. My gay friends who wonder if they can come out at work and still keep their job or their set of friends. Or who wonder if they can be honest with their families about the deepest truths that make up so much of who they are. Or my gay friends who are not allowed to legally, right now, walk down to the Springfield courthouse and get the same marriage license that I can easily get without batting an eye simply because I was born as a straight male. What I face as an ally is nothing compared to what my gay brothers and sisters face on a daily basis. And so today we are here to celebrate you. My LGBT friends, we are here to celebrate you.